This episode is brought to you by The Skeptical Buddha, The Tao of Science, my book, which is a thoughtful discourse on Eastern philosophy and how it helped birth ideas required for science and skepticism and the way it fell behind in the face of new evidence. This book discusses the long history of both philosophies as well as the tenets and variations within the varying sects, along with psychology and our own natural biases. It discusses how to counter our natural biases using science and the underlying concepts of meditation and mindfulness, a more complex understanding of how science operates than most of the public understands, and why it is the best tool we have to discover truth and reality, as well as philosophical ideas we might embrace as technology progresses. The material is packaged in a way that the average person can understand, with rich illustrations to draw the reader in and feel at peace. Welcome to After School Democracy, the podcast that attempts to fill in the gaps you almost certainly missed in school about politics, economics, and history. For much of my career at corporate board meetings, they would constantly throw around and laud people who got their Six Sigma black belts, green belts, and yellow belts like they were suddenly better than everyone else. There was a ton of corporate jargon and pretentiousness surrounding it, so I made sure to avoid it at all costs. Six Sigma, for those who don't know, is a form of organizational-wide quality control. It works to analyze what works, what doesn't, and get actual metrics and analysis, saving lots of time and money of waste and efficiency. It also is a set of employee collaboration guidelines to ensure all voices are heard, and there is buy-in from the people actually implementing it, and the higher-ups get to hear the reasoning for any changes with their egos at the door. This isn't because their egos are actually at the door, but it uses psychology to get around and use their ego to make them gain a sense of partial ownership of the decision. Six Sigma was created by Bill Smith in 1986 while working in Motorola, and was so successful in increasing efficiency that Motorola trademarked the concept. Other industries, however, were incredibly reluctant to implement the ideas because the CEOs were so corporate-minded and used intuition of leaders in an old boys network that, in hindsight, created a ton of pointless waste. Motorola was a mostly engineering company, and it was designed by and for engineers with more horizontal hierarchies, so it was especially distasteful to the corporate execs. The reason I saw it as just more corporate jargon and pretentiousness is not a coincidence, because when the designers realized that there was such a resistance from execs, they changed up the naming scheme from engineering jargon, which would have made more sense to me, to corporate jargon to impress and wow the CEOs who had all the power. Since then, many Fortune 500 companies have implemented it, making worker productivity rise to the highest level in world history. All the while, the workers make the same amount, only CEO and shareholder pay goes up with efficiency, even though it's the employees who all implement and do the work to make Six Sigma possible. All my life, the idea of anarchism and direct democracy and the mechanisms for how it would work was never explained by anarchists, mostly because often they didn't know, they just hated the current system. I finally thought I understood it as direct democracy and then got chewed out by an anarchist online, claiming that only consensus democracy was true anarchism, and everything else was just posers and a fake trick to make people think they had freedom. I was, of course, even more confused now, and, well, I guess I really don't understand what anarchism is once again, just as, if not more confused. During a period during COVID, where there was a lot of downtime, I decided to start looking into Six Sigma, thinking it might help my chances of getting a raise, and I'm sitting around doing little anyway, so I might as well. After reading the white belt manual, it sorta made sense. After the yellow belt, it all became clear, and I really finally began to respect and understand and appreciate what a genius concept Six Sigma is. Then randomly, around the same time, I happened to watch a video by Androism about consensus democracy, and while listening, things started to really sound familiar. Wait a dang minute, this is just Six Sigma, like literally verbatim, just Six Sigma. A concept proven to work and increase efficiency drastically. I couldn't believe it. Everyone says direct and consensus democracy cannot work, and consensus democracy may not be able to work on a grand scale. That is possible, but it can work in committees and local governments where the citizens are well versed in Six Sigma and actually engaged. The more literate of Six Sigma people are, the more likely it will work on a large scale as well. In fact, all anarchists and anyone curious about how anarchism would even work dealing with people's psychology and ego should all read at least the Six Sigma Yellow Belt Manual, which is free online to anyone. Sadly, you have to get through the intentional corporate fluff and jargon, but once you can get past that, you will see what a gem it actually is. That, along with understanding how humans naturally, instinctively organize and pull together in times of disaster, as written in Paradise Made in Hell, as well as understanding how communities used to function, as opposed to how they barely function in a consumerist society, and you can begin to understand that the idea of anarchism and direct democracy is not as crazy as it sounds on its face. So as always, thank you all for watching this as a video or listening to this as a podcast, which I'm sure was completely uncontroversial to anyone, especially to the YouTube monetization team. So if you found this useful, please donate to my Patreon. Just a reminder that I'm Anubis2814 on YouTube, and I have almost 700 videos on my channel that I've made over the past 11 years on religion, science, psychology, and politics. Please go check them out, and if your site has the option, like, rate, review, and comment. A special thanks goes out to Kendall Copperberg, Mylon Mia, Ogrel, Elias Garcia Guevara, and Joe Taylor for their $10 or more Wapawet level donations. I'm always humbled by the fact that they find my work worth funding and worth driving me forward. Thank you all. Please consider donating to my work if you can, and thank you all for listening.